where he was carrying Tharoor's book, Why I Am a Hindu, instead of the Bhagavad Gita, because she felt that was much more relevant than the Gita itself. And she shared this proud revolutionary moment on social media, for which Tharoor acknowledged, saying he's humbled and honored and so on. So you can see that his intellectual might and power of influence in the society is well established today. But why is he an intellectual Ravana?
Now, moving forward to our next presentation, Divya Reddy is an engineer and a postgraduate in management who joined Infinity Foundation India as a researcher and host of the Youth Ask series. At Infinity Foundation India, she is actively involved in consolidating the youth to carry forward the vision and mission of this organization. Now, I kindly request Divya to present her paper on Shashi Tharoor.
Namaste, everyone. So my essay focuses on the work of the very popular politician, Mr. Shashi Tharoor. He's also an acclaimed author and a public intellectual with many best-selling books to his credit. He's currently serving as the Member of Parliament from Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. He has also served as the Minister of External Affairs and Human Resource Development in the Indian government. He was also formerly the Under Secretary General of the United Nations. Now, why is he important? Why is he part of this anthology? Well, Tharoor has impeccable academic credentials. He earned his PhD at just the age of 22. Then he went on to have a very successful career as an international diplomat and also a very successful career as a politician. He is currently a leader in the Indian political arena with millions of followers. He's known for his mastery over English, which is still a mark of intellectual credibility in the Indian society today. He's known to use such exotic words, which is not part of most people's everyday parlance. And his audience he has written on a variety of subjects like Indian history and culture, business, politics, and so on. However, the focus of my essay are on his writings and views on Hinduism primarily. Now, despite his proclamations about his non-scholarly work, his books are considered to be the New Age authority on Hinduism, especially in urban India. So recently, one of his followers shared an image from her son's wedding where he was carrying Tharoor's book, Why I Am a Hindu, instead of the Bhagavad Gita, because she felt that was much more relevant than the Gita itself. And she shared this proud revolutionary moment on social media, for which Tharoor acknowledged, saying he's humbled and honored and so on. So you can see that his intellectual might and power of influence in the society is well established today. But why is he an intellectual Ravana? Well, he uses his eloquence and impressive public persona to propagate his views on Dharma in India. But however, his work on Hinduism is majorly an assortment of theories drawn from colonial Indologists and historians. And just like the historical Ravana, despite his intellectual might and power of influence, his thoughts and actions are counterproductive to Dharma, as we shall discuss in this essay. So what I learned from reading Tharoor's exhaustive work on Hinduism is that he has this hypothesis or a key message that he wants to convey, that Hinduism is infinitely open. There are absolutely no boundaries whatsoever. Anything and everything is part of Hinduism. Tomorrow you want to worship this mic as a devata, so be it. You can just have a temple for it and start worshipping. So that's the gist of his interpretation of Hinduism. So here are some quotes from his books. This says, Hindu legends have the gods manifesting themselves in so many shapes and forms that the notion of one agreed image of God would be preposterous. Thus, one can imagine God as a pot-bellied man with an elephant head and also as a 10-armed woman with a beatific smile. And since both forms are equally valid to the worshipper, why not also imagine God as a bleeding man on a cross? All are acceptable to the Hindu. Acceptance is always the name of the game. So basically, this is the gist of all his work. Underlying theme is that acceptance is always the name of the game for a Hindu. Indeed, the term the Hindu way is in itself a policy, as there is no one Hindu way. Consequently, then why even be a Hindu? that would someone just logically ask that question. And also, he thinks books are sacred in Hinduism, so you should not, like, it's an offense to ban anything, even if it's a distortion or a misinterpretation of Hinduism. You should not just speak against it because books are sacred. So, speaking against a book would be against the ethos of Hinduism. And in that context, I took this quote from his book, where he was really upset when people banned Wendy Doniger's book. So, this afternoon session, we have our scholars talking about Wendy Doniger. I think I'll leave it to you all to decide whether his narrative on her work is accurate or not. Now, Tharoor on religious conversion, he feels a self-confident faith like Hinduism should not really bother what its adherents do. And he thinks we must just freely allow them to convert. Well, religious conversion essentially stands for exclusivity. To basically tell an adherent of a particular faith that his faith is simply not good enough. To paraphrase Tharoor's own terms, to just say someone, your faith is not good enough, and to convert to a religion that says his way or her way is the only way, it's basically reducing the paths to the ultimate. And Tharoor is very proud of his labels as a pluralistic and a liberal Hindu. So it's an irony that he's supporting an act of reducing diversity. Tharoor is one of the strongest proponents of the Aryan invasion theory, and anyone who tries to refute it, he just discards us as calling them merely, controversy created by Hindutvavadis. He just says, and to support his claims, he says migrations have always been part of the Indian history, so there's no doubt that the Aryans came and founded Hinduism. And his entire chronology is based on this theory. So, it's just basically 1500 BC, they invaded India, they composed the Vedas, and so on. And there's mounting evidence against the theory. Infinity Foundation has produced many conferences, many books on this subject. And even to slightly engage on the other side, he's not ready to do that. So that just speaks volumes of his integrity as a honest interpreter of Hinduism. Now, Tharoor's interpretations of the Vedas, Itihasa, Purana, and Smritis, he believes Hinduism is misogynistic, and he quotes Manusmriti to substantiate his claims. But he does not exactly cite what exactly is he referring to in the Manusmriti when he says these things. It's just say Manusmriti and then say, yes, somewhere there is something about it. And then another case of serious misinterpretation is the term Soma or Somarasa. He just blindly translates it as alcohol. Well, Somarasa means different things in different contexts. Soma means it means Shiva in one context, it means Vishnu in one context, Somanatha, and it is also used as a metaphor because the pressing of the drink signifies purifying of the mind and extracting noble thoughts, because the drink is prepared in a way where you press the plant and extract the rasa. So it is used as a metaphor. And this term has an history of mistranslation and misinterpretation by many Western Indologists, so it's not a surprise that he has just blindly picked that up. And he also claims that vegetarianism is a Jain contribution. Now, you need to notice how he differentiates between dharmic faiths. Jain is a separate thing from Hinduism. And also to imply that it is nothing intrinsic to Brahmins, so please feel free to become non-vegetarians. Don't listen to your ancestors. On Hindutva, he sees that as an assault on Hinduism. He thinks it's not part of the Hinduism. He's made it very clear that it's contradictory to the ethos of Hinduism. It's not a surprise that he opposes this because Hindutva movement is basically to revive the Kshatriya Dharma in Hinduism, basically to reawaken or rekindle the spirit of fighting. And it obviously doesn't sit well with his agenda because his Hinduism is anything goes Hinduism. And I need to make one very important point here. All throughout his work, not once does he ever touch upon the Kshatriya Dharma of Hinduism, which is the very essence of it and also the reason why we are all still here today. And he doesn't simply care to touch upon it because he just doesn't want you to go there. And he questions Hindu customs. Well, he categorizes caste system as a Hindu custom. And he feels that the problems have been cited and legitimized discrimination in some of Hinduism's sacred texts. Again, this is a very the colonial Indologist perspective where they cite Purusha Sutta, and it's a misinterpretation of that, and it's out there. Due to the paucity of time, I don't want to delve into that. Perhaps we can send him a copy of our recent book, Varna, Jati and Caste, for him to understand what exactly is caste system. So now I would like to analyze his work. So there are three themes that, the underlying themes that I would articulate across his work. One, Hinduism is the most tolerant faith. It has no boundaries or barriers of entry. And to retain this openness, you have to just remain like that even if you have no mutual respect. The Kshatriya, the action-oriented approach towards adharma, needs to be subdued as it does not fit the infinitely open, flexible, and tolerable themes of Hinduism. The ideology of Hindutva is contradictory to Hinduism. But some of the questions unanswered by Tharoor, if someone who's new to the subject wants to know about Hinduism, they'll be like, okay, what makes Hinduism so flexible and open? How elastic is Hinduism? Can anything and everything be considered as Hinduism? Does Hinduism have no boundaries at all? Can any book be thought of as the sacred text? Can anything and everything? So these are some basic questions that would arise in anyone's mind. So I've used some of the key concepts from the book Being Different to deconstruct and refute Tharoor's work. Some of that, the three concepts are history centrism. Just to give you a gist of it, basically in the Abrahamic traditions, they believe that human has limited potential. They can't access the infinite spiritual knowledge. So God selects a few prophets and they're sent at a certain historical time to deliver the key spiritual knowledge, and to retain that accurate narrative is very important for humankind. And to lose that narrative would be catastrophic, because the scriptures that your prophets have delivered, you have no direction. There's simply no way of rediscovering it. So that's one of the reasons why they're fixated on one book, one God, that one glorious historical moment. Non-history centrism. The dharmic traditions are flexible and open because we believe humans are born divine. Each and every human being has the capability to access that infinite spiritual knowledge. We don't need a mediator, a facilitator, a prophet in between. Tomorrow, if all our scriptures would disappear, you could still discover the ultimate truth for yourself. So that's the reason why it's flexible and open. And to have that flexibility to do that, you need the Kshatriya Dharma to protect you, to be able to rediscover the truth, which he fails to touch upon. And integral unity. So dharmic traditions believe there is essentially no division between matter, life, and the divine. There is this underlying unity. Synthetic unity is where the Abrahamic traditions are eternally trying to synthetically unite matter, life, and divine. So here, Shashi Tharoor uses the synthetic unity view to explain Hinduism. He first inserts these cleavages, like there are these Aryans, Dravidians, this Jainism, this Sikhism. Basically, he likes to call it the Thali theory of India, where every item can't be mixed with each other, but you still got to coexist. Well, that doesn't happen if you don't have the feeling of oneness coming from within. So that's what he probably aims to achieve. So here's a quote from Being Different, where Dharma philosophers would argue that if you don't have that feeling of oneness from within, it's bound to fall apart. Now, how elastic is Hinduism? Well, it definitely has boundaries. Not anything and everything can be considered as Hinduism. If it were to be so, then we wouldn't have, in the colloquial sense, as Hinduism. Traditional teachings definitely make a clear difference between Dharma and there is a word called adharma. If everything was part of Dharma, then what is adharma? There is Sat and Asat, Daivika and Asuric, and so on. And it definitely has definitive boundaries, like the concepts of karma and reincarnation are very fundamental to explaining the philosophy of Hinduism. So I used another analogy from the book Indra's Net, the internet analogy, to explain the open yet Hinduism, to explain Hinduism with certain boundaries. The internet is not infinitely open, but only relatively so. Its boundaries are defined by what it rejects. For example, viruses or abusive elements. Despite these rejections, the internet has abundant flexibility for the future. Similarly, Hinduism does not comprise all conceivable kinds of spirituality and religious claims because it must exclude those that would destroy its underlying principles of integral unity, openness, and flexibility. Now, is he being a facilitator of cultural appropriation? when you so loosely define Hinduism and say anything and everything goes, obviously we will have products like the Christian yoga. Like instead of using this mudra, you can just say this. Like what difference does it make? And he prefers tolerance over mutual respect, where he's constructing a one-way street. Like you just tolerate the other, but don't expect respect from the other. And obviously, I thought itihasas and our scriptures are full of instances where when you're not accorded the respect that you deserve, you've got to wake up and fight. That's the essence of the Bhagavad Gita and many other itihasas that are still there today. But that is something that he fails to touch upon. And another serious case in his work is the number of Sanskrit mistranslations. So there are certain terms in Sanskrit which have no equivalence in English, and to loosely translate them would essentially be distorting the meaning of the word, which he essentially does. He calls Brahma, Vishnu, Ishvara as Holy Trinity, Moksha and Mukti as salvation. Well, salvation is not equal to Moksha. Paramatma as the Supreme Soul, Hanuman as just a mere monkey god, Maya as illusion, and so on. Now, what are the implications of Tharoor's work? Well, you can see here we'll have Jesus painted as a Shiva, or there is Christian yoga, and eventually it'll be not too far away when we end up like the Native Americans, just in a museum. When your entire culture is appropriated by the dominant force, you have nothing left. Probably that's one of his goals. So here it's very clear from his work that he's looking to create this class of subservient, submissive Hindus. And he's deliberately misinterpreting the sacred text to put an Hindu to shame, where you have nothing to be proud of. So you're as if someone says there's something bad in another religion, before that religion you just jump up and say, oh, well, even mine is equally bad, and so on and so forth. So young Hindu readers who are reading his books to, in address to yearnings for identity, are subconsciously seeking to understand their place in the world, will be manipulated and their Hindu identities weakened. Thank you.